Herzlich willkommen. Herzlich willkommen heute am dritten und Schlusstag des 20. Salzburg Europe Summit der Konferenz europäischer Städte und Regionen. Dieser Summit findet in einer
The summit is taking place at a time that is characterized by many crises, problems and challenges. The coronavirus pandemic has tested our ability to withstand this war in Ukraine. This has really changed everything around all the European nation states, no matter whether within the European Union or outside of it. Our entire society is faced with many different challenges. So everybody is aware of the fact that this requires reforms. In 6 dialogue events with more than 60 panelists, most of them are here on site, and many of them have joined also from outside of Austria and joined us online. So this first dialogue that we had yesterday dealt with the subject of the future of Europe. No future without reforms. The distinguished keynotes were held by Christian Michalski, the Prime Minister of North Macedonia, Borut Pahor, the former President of Slovenia, Mr. Foto, Minister for Trade of the Republic of Hungary, also representatives of the Council Presidency of Hungary, and also the EU Commissioner in charge of the budget, Johannes Hahn. The EU enlargement, geopolitical necessity, was the next dialogue. The keynote was given by Karolina Edstadler, and we also had the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine, Olga Stefanishyna. The EU considers the enlargement as a geopolitical investment into peace, prosperity in Europe. This enlargement policy is also part of the geostrategic competition with Russia and China. There is a unity that, and there's agreement that we need to promote the enlargement by the Western Balkans, and these countries cannot be left to Russia or China. The question is how this is to be done, how we want to accelerate this enlargement process. Now, if we want to have a strong economy in the EU, we need to do everything in order to be at the vanguard of innovation. In yesterday's dialogue in the afternoon, how can the EU remain competitive? We had a high-ranking and very distinguished panel, such as the CEO of Palfinger AG, Andreas Klauser. In spite of the fact that he has a company with thousands of employees that produces cranes for ships and ports, he gave a flaming appeal for a strong European industry and a strong policy for the business location here in Europe. You could summarize his statement by saying that the US are innovative, China is productive, and Europe is regulative. Now, there are 3 topics in our focus today that are important for Europe of the regions. The first dialogue of this day, where we'll deal with energy questions. It links up with yesterday's dialogue about the competitiveness of Europe. So energy plays an important role, and we are very pleased about the contributions coming from distinguished experts. In the next dialogue, we'll talk about the subject that has been very important also during the election campaigns in the various member states, namely migration, and in particular illegal migration. So the question that many people are asking themselves is, how can this problem be solved, and can it be solved? And finally, we'll close this anniversary summit with a dialogue that many municipalities, cities, and a lot of citizens of Europe are affected by in a palpable way, namely how do we revitalize the empty town centers and city centers. For many centuries, the city centers offered everything we would need. The traditional homes close to the churches and pubs and crafts, the schools, the post office, and in the municipal or town squares there were marketplaces. And today often the city and town centers are, well, empty, and many shops are shutting down. So during this panel we are going to focus on the revitalization, on successful revitalization of town and city centers. So we're looking forward to that. I'm very pleased that our conference is followed also by a lot of young people. And today we have also students here at this Salzburg Europe Summit. And I'm very pleased to be able to welcome also students from the business school and the grammar school Neumayr and the Karl-Heinz Böhm grammar school. Explicitly, I want to thank our highly committed teachers who are making these events possible. They prepare it, they accompany it, and they probably also do a follow-up. And on behalf of the Institute of the Regions of Europe, IRE, I would like to thank the panelists of this day who are going to share their expertise with us. And I would like to thank the three moderators, Gundula Geiginger from Post 4, Werner Seike also from Post 4, and Heidi Huber from the Salzburger Nachrichten newspaper, who is going to moderate the last panel. Now, the Institute of the Regions is pursuing a goal, namely to help network people, promote dialogue, and strengthen regions. The Institute of the Regions of Europe thus strengthens the subsidiarity of Europe, promotes cross-border cohesion, and brings together European regions. On behalf of the Institutes of the Regions of Europe, IRE, I would like to once again say thank you and welcome today. Thank you very much, and good morning also from me. The European Union has the vision of an energy union. That's the vision of a common electricity and gas market that goes from Finland all the way to Sweden. And the people in the European Union are provided with affordable and clean energy. So there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of that. We need to focus on renewable energy sources, low emission sources, and to become independent of energy imports. In order to manage this conversion, it is important for member states to work together closely, because this will make it cheaper and safer to have a good power supply for all consumers. Where we stand in terms of the way towards this energy union, what obstacles need to be overcome, and what solutions we can find will be discussed in the coming hours with experts here on the panel who are coming from various countries and various institutions. So there are a lot of different perspectives shedding light on that subject. I'd like to welcome Michael Bamminger, CEO of Salzburg AG, Edith Herzog, the chairwoman of the administrative board of the EU Agency for Cooperation of Energy Regulators, based in Ljubljana, Slovenia, Christoph Maurer, energy expert, managing director of Consentec GmbH in Germany, and Ambassador Rovshan Sarabayli, ambassador from Azerbaijan in Austria. And we're going to continue the discussion in English because it is a bit difficult to have simultaneous interpretation here at the panel. Now let us move over to Belgrade, where I'd like to welcome Dubravka Čidović-Hadanović.
May I ask you for your opening words and your thoughts about an European energy union for a start?
Thank you very much, and first and foremost, good morning to you over there, and good morning to all that are listening to these interesting conversations in interesting times. Energy has always been a very important topic, not only for regional context, but also for more global contexts, and we have seen this and witnessed this, unfortunately, during the recent energy crisis. So everything that has been done in the past 3 years at the European level and regional level certainly is to be better prepared for possible future disturbances and, of course, to increase the security of energy sources, to have more available routes and to have more diversification of energy sources. And these certainly efforts will continue at the European level. But we also need to be aware of markets that are linked to the European Union energy market. This is certainly the case for the Western Balkans and Southeast Europe and more wider the region that Serbia belongs to, because overall we are all interconnected. We are interconnected when in Serbia's case with 8 borders. We have 8 interconnectors when it comes to electricity, and half of them are EU member states. So from that perspective, of course, having this region as secure as possible will contribute to the greater security of the energy market of the European Union. And that's why we have had, not in the last 3 years, but since 2006 and 2007, with the creation of the Energy Secretariat and the energy market where the countries of Western Balkans belong to, that are very much linked with the European Union energy market, in order to integrate really the two and have the free energy flow, whether it comes to electricity or to gas. What Serbia is doing in that regard is to streamline further and to fulfill the preconditions for joining the single energy market by first and foremost market coupling, and the precondition for that is the regulation to be harmonized. We are currently transposing the most recent EU energy package into the Serbian legislation. This process is ongoing, and I expect the government to adopt the amendments to the energy law during the course of October or early November. So certainly also to ensure the parliamentary hearing before the end of the year. And this will then pave the way for further steps that are needed to be fulfilled for the integration of energy markets and market coupling. In that context, it's not only the regulatory framework, it is really the strategic thinking, not only to 2030, but to 2040 and 2050, and how do we see and how this region sees the decarbonization efforts, the reaching climate targets. And in that context, although our position is quite unfavorable due to the very large dependency on coal, we have taken steps when it comes to the adoption of national climate and energy plan that also EU member states are due to adopt. The government has adopted it earlier this year. It envisages close to 50% of generation from renewable energy sources by 2030, and ambition to reach net zero in 2050. For that, of course, the steps need to be taken today, especially when it comes to 2050, and especially to ensure the baseload energy that is not fossil fuel. And for that, of course, there are not that many choices, and we see nuclear energy as one of certainly credible fuels that can help us secure the net zero in 2050. When we look at the shorter term plans, of course, it's integration of renewable energy such as wind, and solar, more hydropower, especially for storage, so more pumped hydropower capacities that we plan to build in the next 5 years. And very recently, we have signed a contract for the construction of 1 gigawatt of solar power in 6 locations across Serbia, with 200 megawatt of battery storage, so securing also the transmission system that can sustain the integration of high percentage of renewable sources into the grid by allowing the battery storages. So I believe all these efforts are important from a regional point of view, because of course the energy flows and energy sees no borders in that context, at least in the European market. So we all need to stream to similar goals in order to achieve really the big ambition, and that is more cleaner energy for our citizens, and then also, of course, for our industries that more and more needs to be aligned also at the global level with the global standards, with the UN targets, and this is something that at the end we all need to stream to really leave better planet for future generations. Of course, besides electricity, gas is a very important source of energy in Europe, but also in this region, and having diversification without physical possibilities to diversify is not possible. So infrastructure needs to be built in order to really be able to diversify. In that context, Serbia, with the help of EU, has completed a major piece of infrastructure last year, and that is the gas interconnection with Bulgaria that has enabled us to secure gas from Caspian Sea, namely Azerbaijan, but also from LNG terminal in Greece that has started to operate, and more gas diversification and gas interconnections with primarily North Macedonia and Romania, so more capacities in the next 2 to 3 years will enable even greater diversification. This is important not only for Serbia, but also for the region, because Serbia is a transit country also for Hungary, Slovakia, Austria, when gas is concerned, same as electricity at the end of the day. So also more investments in transmission, better interconnectivity, both with Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria on one side, on the other side, Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and further down to Italy will provide for more secure energy supply, not only, as I say, to our country and to this region, but also for EU member states. So we will continue to strive with these efforts to improve the interconnectivity, to align more with the EU regulations, and at the end, really to be a meaningful player in this region when transit of energy and energy sources is concerned. So a dialogue and close communication and coordination with the European Commission, the neighboring countries, but also EU member states is something that we will continue to do and continue to put our efforts to. And I think already a lot has been achieved also with the first auctions for premiums for contract for difference that we have successfully managed to complete last year, that has enabled 10% of total installed capacities in just one auction from renewable energy sources that will be completed by 2026. So that's another meaningful step in diversification of electricity production from renewable sources, incentivizing private sector, and there are a lot of private investors also from the EU present in Serbia. On the other side, we are planning for the second round of auctions to be announced in November. So the market is very eager for that as well. And just to remind that the auctions held last year were the largest in this part of Europe as one single auctions fully digitalized and fully in line with the EU standards. So we will continue also to strive that process in order to really, on one side, stimulate private sector development, but also enable for more renewable energy in our market that then, of course, is important for the entire region, not least for the introduction of CBAM that awaits us in 2026, that we need to plan how to address and really ensure the export of goods and of electricity. So I hope that gives an overview, but I'm of course happy to listen to the discussions and to contribute more. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so far. Well, I've got a few more questions because you already mentioned diversifying the gas supply. Can you explain to what extent Serbia currently can rely on gas sources other than Russia?
Well, as I said, our today's position when it comes to gas supply is much more favorable than it was 2 or 3 years ago. In 2021, we did finish the construction of the Balkan stream. That was before the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. That was primarily relying on the Turkish stream, so on the Russian gas supply. However, besides that route, we didn't have alternative routes until last December, so until a year ago, when the gas interconnector between Serbia and Bulgaria, so some 120 kilometers of a gas pipeline has been built with the help of the European Union, and with the completion of that project for the first time, we have actually access to multiple sources of gas supply, primarily that is Azerbaijan and recently operational LNG terminal in Greece. At the end of last year, we have signed the contract for the delivery of up to 400 million cubic meters per year of natural gas from Azerbaijan, and in the meantime, additional deliveries of up to 1 million cubic meters per day have been secured, so just for this winter season and contracted. Also, there are plans that as of 2026, or actually end of 26, so really early 27, that Azerbaijan would be able to deliver to us up to 1 BCM, which then would secure around 1/3 of our projected demand, or slightly less, or slightly more, depending, of course, on the winter season, whether it's colder or milder winter. But this is something that we are continuing to discuss with partners from Azerbaijan, so to see to what extent they have the ability really to supply us through this route. That then, of course, we are interconnected with Hungary, and let's say any extras in terms of volumes are then transported to Hungary and to the other EU member states. We have also secured 300 million cubic meters per year, or reserved from LNG terminal in Greece. So this is an additional capacity that in case of the need can be used. And this year we have signed 2 agreements for the construction of new gas interconnections, one with Romania, that will have the capacity of 1.6 billion cubic meters per year, and one with North Macedonia of 1.2 billion cubic meters per year. And once these 2 gas interconnections are completed, together with the one with Bulgaria that is already in function, we would be able to secure 100% of our demand, of course, depending on the projections and how the demand will grow, but this is at least the estimates today, or close to 100%. And of course, this will give a stage to further diversification and to further possibilities also for the transit of gas through Serbia that then could be delivered to other countries in the EU. So we will continue to work on these projects, on their completion, together with, in coordination, in this case, with our Romanian partners and those from North Macedonia, to ensure that within the next, as the target, 2 years, these projects are completed.
Okay. You already mentioned some projects within the field of renewable energy, but Serbia is also about to lift the ban on nuclear energy after 25 years. How do you see the development of that kind of energy in Serbia in the upcoming years?
Well, it's certainly challenging. When you start something from scratch, it's always challenging, and this would be the case here. But we have introduced in 1989, after the accident in Chernobyl, Serbia, through the legislation, has introduced a ban on the construction of nuclear terminals. And this is something that has been in power ever since. It hasn't been changed. Well, unfortunately, looking to 40 years back, we have actually planned the opening of a nuclear power plant in Serbia in 1985. So there were even plans, locations selected, and with all the, of course, engineering and everything else that needed to be put in place. And then with this accident in Chernobyl, everything stops, and then this moratorium was introduced. So a lot of Serbia's engineers from this field have immigrated during the 90s. So a lot of experts in this field have actually not been available anymore in the country. We have interconnected with some of them that have worked all over the world, and especially in the US and in Europe on projects of this kind. So to incentivize them to come back, or some of them are already retired, but certainly still with a very huge experience in this field. As of course, knowledge is the first precondition to develop nuclear energy. We still have institutes, we still have institutions, we still have faculties that teach this subject. So of course, making this base stronger would be the first precondition besides lifting the ban. That's, of course, these amendments to the law will allow for, that we expect to be adopted very soon, that will also integrate the new EU energy package. So overall, the regulatory framework will be in place. We need to build institutional capacities, and in that regard, we plan to cooperate with more than 20 institutions in the country, 5 other ministries, but also a lot of faculties, a lot of research institutes. We have cooperation with the International Atomic Agency since 2001, so through regular exchanges and visits and etc. So continuing to strengthen that, and of course following very closely the recommendations from International Atomic Agency. We have started in cooperation with the French EDF to work on the preliminary analysis on the best options, and also the possibilities of integration of nuclear energy into our grid. Of course, the energy strategy to 2050 envisages one scenario where after 2040 there is 1,000 megawatt from nuclear energy as a baseload energy, because of course having to switch from coal to maybe a certain period of time gas as transition fuel, as a base load. But then after that, we will be only left with renewables, which of course need some kind of a base load. And in that context, nuclear certainly is an alternative in abandoning coal facilities. And that's a process. It's a process that will take 15 years. But from EU taxonomy point of view, and of course, having looked what many countries in the world plans are when it comes to nuclear energy, certainly we believe that it is a credible alternative, especially when it comes to the CO2 emissions, knowing that nuclear energy emits 70 times less CO2 than coal facilities and 40 times less than gas. So from that point of view, from ecological point of view, it's certainly an option. Of course, it's costly. It takes time, but it needs to be well prepared. So what we are really doing now is laying the ground foundations for this to be built in the next 10 to 12 years. I think it's a reasonable time estimates. We are also talking to countries such as South Korea, who have a lot of experience in this field, Japan as well. United Arab Emirates have managed to complete the project starting from scratch as well in 2007. So now they have completed the 4 reactors with the help of South Korea. So I think really the alternatives need to be looked into, especially when it comes to new technology such as SMRs that are still not yet widely in use, but we see early signs that this technology will be developed further. It is to some extent in China and in Russia, but the US is working hard on that, as well as the UK. So talking to really different partners, trying to first through the analysis to get to the best options. And then when we have the options laid down, we will be able to choose the solutions and really then work on the delivery of this program. So that's our aim for the time being, especially with the ambition by 2050 to have net zero emissions of CO2. I believe that this is certainly the road to take.
Allow me one last brief question, because for the EU, Serbia also plays a very important role when it comes to the energy transition, as Serbia's got sources of lithium. And the EU and Serbia have signed a memorandum of understanding declaring that they will support a mining project in Serbia, but this project is heavily criticized within Serbia. How will you convince people in your country of this project on the one hand, but also ensure that it has no negative effects on the people living there?
Well, it's certainly the critical raw materials are something that is very important, not only from the EU perspective, but also global perspective. Serbia has one of the best explored lithium deposits in Europe and also in the wider context, since the project has been in exploration since 2004. So it's been 20 years, as you know, in mining. The time is necessary to get to the credible results. So the verified deposits amount to 158 million tons, which are ranked 12th in the world and 3rd in Europe. I believe that from the European perspective, these reserves, due to their potential, are even more highly ranked, probably first or second in Europe. So from that perspective, I think it is something that we need to carefully look into, what it represents as a development possibility for Serbia, what it represents for climate change targets, for energy transition, which are also very important topics from ecological point of view and environmental protection point of view. So, of course, mining brings risks that need to be carefully analyzed and mitigated. And this is a process, as every project, a delivery. So it needs to be carefully reviewed. It needs to go through necessary public consultations, and it needs to come to the best solutions when it comes to the delivery. Our certainly aim is, if this project is realized, is not to export the raw material, but to have the whole value chain developed in Serbia, from cathode production to battery production to electric vehicles at the end, production in Serbia. This lithium deposit can contribute to the production of around 1 million electric vehicles per year. So certainly it is the most significant than any other European project that is in development at this stage, be it in Germany, France, Finland or Portugal. Yes, the project has suffered quite a negative campaign in the last 3 years. Both from social media point of view and traditional media point of view. I must emphasize these are mostly opposition media that have had quite a negative stand about the project. Nonetheless, we didn't have, when this campaign has started 3 years ago, we didn't have the solutions, final solutions developed for this project. So a lot of misinformation has been used, that the assumptions about project development were based on projects elsewhere, or they were not accurate, or they were not based on the relevant information from the company that is developing this project, and certainly not from the government authorities about the stages of development. So in that context, regretfully, a lot of, as I say, misinformation has been presented to the public. It certainly has its political dimension, so that on the back of negativity about this project, the government should be discredited, or the government actions. On the other side, there are some genuine concerns about environmental protection or solutions that will be presented. So in that context, our stand is that we need to listen to experts, and expert view, have a very open public debate, and really come to the best solutions. I think that technology of 21st century allow for good solutions that mitigate the negative impact on environment. On the other side, we need also to think about the long-term economic development and possibilities. Serbia is a mining country. Traditionally, for centuries, we have had mining industry as one of the base industries in our country. We had the first mining code in 14th century, so we were one of the first countries in Europe to have the mining code. So I think we have a long tradition, and we need to build on that tradition. Unfortunately, this negative campaign against one project, and that is lithium, has sparked negativism over the whole sector of mining, which is really a pity, and it's something that certainly we need to fight against, because, as I say, the tradition is long, and Serbia is really rich of natural resources that are particularly important for the energy transition and climate change fight. So we will continue really to scrutinize the process of project development. We still need about 2 years until all environmental studies are completed and all technical solutions are proposed. But we witness protests today, which is quite, I mean, it's quite strange. We still don't have even the studies put in front of the public. So what are we talking about really as arguments? So in that context, I think we need to scrutinize the project development, ask the right questions, have the open debate among experts, of course, not necessarily the political activists, and we will, I am confident, come to the best solution, not only for this project, but for the future economic development of Serbia.
Thank you very much, Ms. Đedović-Handanović, for your contribution and your time. Thanks.
Thank you, and I wish you a very successful conference.
Thank you. Well, we've heard many interesting aspects already, and we'll elaborate on some of them a bit more within the discussion. Still, I'd like to start with a more general question to all of you. Namely, what is your perspective on this way to our energy union? Where do you think do we stand right now? And what particular role do you play within this journey? Maybe we start with you, Ms. Herzog.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks for the invitation. Especially thanks to organize this conference already 20 times, promoting the European Union. And I'm very happy to be invited here. I am the chairman of the ACER. ACER is the Agency for Cooperation of the Energy Regulators, located in Ljubljana. And of course, all the European member states regulators are members of the agency. I'd like to maybe say that the IRA and ACER has something in common, because one of your governing member of IRA is also a member of the governing board of the ACER, namely Paul Rübig, the former Austrian MEP, who is sitting in both boards, yours and ours in Ljubljana. Before I go to the ACER role, I'd like to elaborate just a bit what is the Energy Union, because I think that it's important to get to the starting point. Yeah, the Energy Union, with that name, started in 2016 under the Slovakian presidency. Yeah, so now we have a Hungarian presidency. It started with the Slovakian presidency with something called Bratislava Declaration, where the member state prime ministers and presidents, depending on the country, anonymously agreed that there is a need for energy union, and they asked the European Commission and they asked their ministries to work towards the energy union. Then the energy union process started with the different legislations, and the legislations at the European level has been finished end of last year, beginning of this year. So this is the time frame we are talking about the energy union, yeah, from 2016. Very interestingly, the European prime ministers, of course, are changing from 2016. So maybe there is a slight difference that how they look the energy union. And there are countries where the prime ministers do not change, but they change their opinion towards the European Union. And this is not something which belongs to the ACER. Maybe the last thing on this energy union I'd like to say, I'd like to quote someone who is very well known in Austria, Sigmund Freud. Because Sigmund Freud said on the partnerships that the partnerships are very similar to the hedgehogs in winter. When there is a winter, the hedgehogs are freezing, therefore they are getting closer and closer together to be warmed. But as they are getting closer and closer together, the spikes are hurting each other, therefore they try to go away. Yeah? So there is a bit of oscillation between being frozen or being too spiky towards each other. And the European Union, especially the Energy Union, seems to follow Mr. Freud's analogy. So we are like a family in that sense. The good news that we survived the winter, we survived the transition period, yeah, and we survived many things with this partnership, but we are spiking, yes. So what is then the ACER role? And I will be very short on this. ACER has a very limited role. ACER is implementing legislation adopted by the European Union. And as I said, we are not a European agency, but we are agency of the cooperation of the national regulators. So the national regulators and the employees working in the national regulators work very hardly to get the cross-border standards, the cross-border networks, being a technical or service solutions that we can achieve the cross-border cooperation seamlessly, fluently, and we have not to stop in each individual transaction, but we have the common rules. This work started already in 2007. That was the time when the agency has been established. And meanwhile, not just the Energy Union, but the energy regulation already happened before. The cross-border from 0 to 1, from 1 to 15 to 25%, and now with the Energy Union up to 70% is just a continuity. So it's for us, as an energy regulatory agency, it's a scaling up, and we are very, very proud, and I'd like to say thanks for the energy regulators in that sense, that all the standardization work they did, both for services and for technical solution, could survive the stress, could survive the increase of the cooperation, but could survive also the very, very difficult winter when the hedgehogs were about to remove. So our major role is to create a standardization. The second role of the agency is the market monitoring, yeah, of the energy market monitoring, and in that work we follow the malbehavior. Yeah, we try to figure out with the big data methods if somebody is not behaving well. And recently, with the energy regulation, we have got an investigation power. So not only we can recognize if there is a malbehavior, but we can also, in the worst case scenario, act on this. And of course, the Energy Agency collects many data. So we are giving feedback. We are a kind of think tank of the EU institutions to tell them what works, what not. So that's what we do as an ASAT. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, Ms. Barman, can you also explain how you see the European Union on a way to an energy union and what your role is, especially as a supplier, a regional supplier?
Well, I'm optimistic. I would have gone further back in time when talking about the energy union, because when liberalizing European markets, which was in 2000, the whole system started to change. And I think we've made some real progress in that. When looking back in time, you couldn't even choose your supplier of energy. Anyhow, looking back, seeing all the progress, there surely are obstacles, and it's not always a straight line. You called it the hedgehog phenomenon. I would have said it's kind of a moving target. The last crisis started to take back or to individualize or nationalize several steps. We wanted to become a whole market. We're on our way there and there, but we also started to make different bidding zones, make even smaller bidding zones. Probably Mr. Maurer is going to go into detail there. But let me not look back in time, let me have a look forward, because I really am a fan of that idea to make Europe a whole market, but in the sense of a market. And a huge discussion we started, at least in Austria, is if market economy with rules, with restrictions, is really the best system on that. I think it is. It is the most efficient. It is the most welfare-oriented system, but it needs some regulations, some rules, some interventions in time of crisis. And referring to the Draghi report, which spends quite some space for energy, I would take some inputs out of there. I think we need to focus on innovation in the energy system, in the whole energy system, and with focus to the European Union, to the European energy market. We need to focus on investments. This huge transformation is no walk in the park. It's nothing to write slides about and to make some directive policies and reports. This is a huge deal, and we need a lot of money to do it. So we need the regulatory framework that allows innovation and investment. And let me add something that's not so specifically in Draghi's report, that is, we have a huge deal, we have a huge responsibility in communicating, in telling people why it's necessary and what's going to happen. I always say the same thing. In Austria, we have this very, very famous and very often used phrase, the sun does not send any invoices, the sun does not charge people. And I think it's the worst sentence we can have, because it doesn't send any invoices regarding to producing costs, as we have with gas. But it obviously does send a lot of cost when we keep on talking about the energy system, about flexibility, about infrastructure, about grid investments, and all those costs are going to be paid by someone. So communicating and explaining what is to do, in my opinion, is going to be a huge and very important issue, because any change project, and this is going to be a huge, phenomenal change, needs a ton of communication. What is our role as Salzburg AG? We're the regional utility. Let me boil it down to maybe a very, very shortened answer. All those ideas, regulations, directives, all those good ideas coming from Brussels, going via Vienna, need to be translated to Salzburg. Somebody has to do it, and that's our job.
Thank you. So your job is to help companies on the way to the energy union, or to guide them. What is your perspective on our way and on our current situation?
Okay. Thank you first for the invitation to that great conference here. Yeah, perhaps just to explain a little bit on my role. I'm a consultant advising not only companies, but actually policymakers, regulatory agencies, and so on, giving them expert advice how to manage the energy transition and how to deal with electricity markets in particular. So electricity markets and the relation between electricity markets and grids is where I'm focused on in much of my work. And I've been accompanying that energy transition process and the development of the internal market for electricity and for energy, and also the energy union for almost 20 years now. And I think we have achieved a lot, and so the position is not really bad, especially during the last legislative term of the EU. We implemented the Green Deal, which is a major step forward on our way to getting Europe to a climate-neutral energy system. And it really gives me a lot of trust that we now have, let's say, institutions in place which will guide us on a European level through that way to the energy transition, independent from, let's say, frictions in national policy making. And having a price mechanism for the ETS, and also having implemented the ETS2, so a second carbon price mechanism also for the sectors of heating and transport, really helps and is a huge step forward. That is one positive aspect. The second positive aspect, looking at, let's say, the period of the last 20 years, we have achieved a lot in coordinating short-term markets for energy. So the internal market has, for 20 years now, improved the working of short-term markets, which, let's say, contribute to using existing resources in the energy sector in the most efficient way, in the way that, let's say, delivers the best outcome to the consumers in the energy union. And our focus on short-term markets really has delivered a lot. Looking at the electricity market, for example, now we have that so-called single day-ahead market coupling all over the EU. So all electricity markets in the EU are coupled on a daily basis, and we really try to, let's say, dispatch power plants and renewable electricity generators and so on in the most efficient way for all consumers in the European Union. That really helps. Where we still fall short a little is on, let's say, the long-term integration of the market. So we have a real internal market for the dispatch of generators and so on, where we do not have an internal market for the time being, at least in my perspective, is with regard to investment decisions. So when it is about investing in cross-border infrastructures like grids or in the future a hydrogen system or something like that, and also when we talk about investments and also, let's say, investment vehicles and support systems, support schemes for renewables, for backup power plants which will be needed to deal with the intermittency of renewables and so on. That the market is still much more fractured, and member states mostly do their own thing. And we do not really have an internal market in my perspective. And that will be a huge challenge in the years ahead to, let's say, complete the internal market and making it work also on the long run and have much more coordinated support mechanisms, financing mechanisms, planning mechanisms to really get an integrated energy system which delivers carbon-free electricity in the cheapest way possible, which does not mean, and I think that we have to acknowledge that we get prices back that we have seen, let's say, some 5 years ago or something like that. So the decades of cheap energy will be over in Europe for at least with a very high certainty. So electricity will become more expensive than it was in the past because decarbonized electricity systems are more complex and harder to operate, require more investment and so on. So I don't think we can expect that electricity will, our prices for electricity will come back to the levels we've seen some 10 or 20 years ago. So that will also mean that on the European level, we will have to change a huge, let's say, adaptation, for example, from industries to that change in energy prices. And that's a challenge which we can only manage if we work closely together as a European Union, and which will, single member states will not be in a position to let's say, manage that challenge with much success. So for the time being, I think we have achieved a lot, but the challenges ahead are huge.
Thank you so far. Mr. Sadiq, you are the ambassador of Azerbaijan, a country that plays a very important role for the EU, as you are a new partner for gas delivery. Still, in the first round of questions, I'd like to ask you, how do you see the European ambitions? How do you assess the European Union on its way to an energy union?
Thank you very much for the invitation. Well, we know that Azerbaijan is not part of the European Union. So in terms of energy union, I can wish you all the good luck. But we do cooperate with the European Union on supply side. How to make sure that energy is sustainable, affordable, and reliable. And here, Azerbaijan makes a lot of contribution, as we have seen from the keynote speech. With the European Union, we signed MOU in July 2022 on strategic partnership in the field of energy, which is a roadmap for energy cooperation between Azerbaijan and the European Union. It is based on two, I should say, pillars. The first one is deliveries of natural gas from Azerbaijan through the Southern Gas Corridor, and you can see a map on the screen. We are we're committed to supply double the supply of natural gas from Azerbaijan, from the Caspian Sea to Europe by 2027. So last year we supplied almost 12 billion cubic meters of gas, and which is 45% increase if you compare with 2021. Overall, gas exports from Azerbaijan last year amounted to 23.9 BCMs. And the gas was delivered to European Union, to Turkey, to Georgia, and to Serbia. And we're committed to, and well on track to increase the gas deliveries. Second is that we joined what is called Solidarity Ring Initiative. It is a memorandum of understanding between gas transmission operators, transmission system operators of Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and Azerbaijan and Slovakia, which envisages to increase the capacity, transmission capacity of the gas transmission systems of these countries, which would allow more gas to be delivered from Azerbaijan to Southeastern Europe and Western Balkans. Southern Gas Corridor is dedicated, a system of dedicated pipelines, specifically designed to bring gas from Azerbaijan, from when we have giant Shah Deniz field. To put things in perspective, the size of the reservoir of that field is huge and almost the size of Manhattan Island, so you can imagine. And of course, this is only one pillar of our cooperation with the European Union. The second one is, of course, renewable energy and green transition. Mm-hmm. And we're working on creating synergy between European Union ambitious goal of energy transition and the vast renewable energy potential of Azerbaijan and of the Caspian Sea region.
We'll come to that a bit later,
yes.
to your contribution when it comes to renewable energies. I'd like to stick with renewable energies, but for a start, I'd like to put a focus on the challenges that go along with this transition. Mr. Maurer, you said that, or we all know that one of the main tasks is to increase the renewable energies, but there is one huge change that goes along with it, and you named it. You said there is a shift from former times where we used to produce power when we needed it to we have the power when it's available because sun is shining or wind is blowing or whatever. So what are the concrete consequences that go along with this huge change in electricity production?
You're totally right. So if we look back, we were used to, let's say, consume electricity whenever we wanted and didn't care about electricity prices or something like that. So we come from an electricity system where generation was following demand. Now we're heading into a system where a lot or a major share of the generation and its availability will be determined by weather conditions. And such system can be operated safely and securely. There are a lot of studies which show that there is no need to fear that a system which is based on volatile renewables will end up in blackouts or something like that, or in the actual unavailability of electricity. But we have to get used to the idea that it will, for example, become more expensive to consume electricity in periods when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing. The system will get the cheaper, the more flexible demand reacts to the availability of supply. So in the past, we had a system where supply was following demand. In the future, we will have to have a system where parts of the demand, not the household consumers which are switching on their ovens or their washing machines, but for example, electrolyzers and charging of battery electric vehicles and so on, and also some parts of the industry, will have lower invoices, lower electricity bills to pay if they flexibly react to the available power supply at a certain point or a certain location and a certain time. So that shift, that transition from, let's say, dispatchable, controllable thermal generation to volatile renewable generation actually means that the value of electricity in the future will change with locations and it will change with time. And we will have to reflect that in our electricity markets. So I think what we actually need is to make our markets much more flexible and to, let's say, send to the electricity consumers the signal about the actual value of electricity at a certain point in time, which means that electricity prices will have to be much more volatile. For example, during summertime, you will have very low electricity prices during daytime when the sun is shining, when there's a lot of sun available. You might have higher electricity prices in the evening times or in the morning times when sun goes down, and you will have to ramp up backup generation and so on. And to make that system as cheap as possible, it will be important that consumers in the future will see and will get these signals and will be exposed to such price signals. At the same time, being exposed to volatile prices also means some kind of risk to consumers. And I think one of the major challenges we are facing is to, let's say, develop pricing mechanisms and market mechanisms which at the same time, let's say, expose consumers to price volatility, but hedge them against price risks on the long run. So if I know that on average I do not pay more than, for example, in Germany, about 30 cents per kilowatt hour, which is the current price of electricity for most household consumers, if I know that I can lock in that average price for a longer time period, then perhaps it will be much more acceptable to me to be exposed to price volatility in the short run. So getting price signals which mean that I will have to pay more if I consume during peak price hours and have to consume less if I consume during hours where there's abundant supply of renewable electricity. But getting consumers to think about their consumption patterns and to shift the parts of the electricity consumption which are really flexible to hours where there is a lot of renewable supply available is of utmost importance. And that does not mean that there will have to be, let's say, high losses or high inconveniences. So if, for example, if you think about charging your battery electric vehicle in the future, typically, you will have to charge a few kilowatt hours per day if you're, let's say, a typical consumer of transportation energy. And that can be done within an hour or something like that. So your normal car will be recharged within an hour. So, it will typically stand there in your garage for 10 or 12 or 15 hours or something like that. So having the possibility to shift the charging to that hour where there's the highest supply of renewable electricity available does not come at a very high cost point or high inconvenience point for consumers, but it needs a lot of digitization, for example. It needs a lot of processes which will make that work. So you will not want to sit at your desk in the evening and think about when to charge your BEV during nighttime. You will want to have an app on your iPhone where you simply push a button and say, well, it has to be charged at 7 in the morning, and the app will have to think about the remaining issues and simply guarantee that you get the best price and at the same time provide flexibility to the system. Now, that is one pillar. The other pillar, which becomes equally important, is that renewable electricity generators will have to think about their contribution to the system. In the past, renewable electricity generators were a tiny fraction of the overall system, and we allowed them to produce whenever they could and whenever they wanted, without thinking too much about the system. Now, in Germany, we have about 60% of renewable generation now, most of it which comes from wind and solar generation, so volatile renewable generation. It will not be possible to have a system where the producers of renewable electricity do not think about their impact on the system. And that will become a major challenge in the years ahead. So if you look at during summertime, nowadays we typically have negative prices on sunny days, not only in Germany, but in a lot of European countries and electricity markets, which means that actually there is no need for the electricity produced. So that's what the negative price tells us. We have more electricity than we can sensibly consume, which really is not a sensible system. So it's not only consumers which will have to become more flexible, but also the producers of renewable electricity will have to react to market price signals, and that's the challenge ahead.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Warminger, we've heard that we need to be more flexible when it comes to prices. How difficult is that to implement for your customers?
We're coming from a system where nobody had to think about the relation of pricing and the time where they consumed. And there is a lot to tell. I'll keep it on one focus point. I think it would be a huge step to make clear that the price everybody of you is paying on your bill consists of three major parts. It's the energy part, it's the grid part, and it's taxes. And the second step we should take, and that's just the first two, Mr. Maurer explained the whole context. The second step is that the energy part you're paying is not only the amount of kilowatt hours you're consuming, but it's also the value of when you're consuming it. And we should start there, because the system's no rocket science, but it's also not only counting kilowatt hours. So if we look forward to the next year, all the energy suppliers, all the electricity suppliers in Austria keep on dropping prices. Prices are going down, energy prices are going down. But the grid prices are going up, and so are, with the utmost highest speed in that context, taxes and subsidies. So you all are paying subsidies for the rise in photovoltaics, which is good that we have the speed regarding the renewable system. But you all are paying for that. You all are paying the rising taxes. You all are paying the rising grids, which we need if we want to decarbonize the system. And starting there to make clear that it's not the utilities, and maybe a very subjective point, but making clear that it's not the utilities giving thumbs up or down, and that's the way we make prices, will be essential. And I come back to what I said in my first statement, to explain what's happening and to make it more understandable for people to go along with that huge change process. Because if we want to transform the whole system, this is the beginning of that dynamics. And all the things Mr. Maurer said with flexibility and maybe changing behavior and maybe charging your Tesla or any other electric vehicle when it's good for the system, so it's going to be cheap, are the further steps. We need to lay the ground where people need to understand what's happening, and this is going to happen next year.
Mr. Herzog, as you've heard about more flexible prices, about a changing system, my question to you, does it get more difficult for the regulators to keep an eye on the prices for the customers? And what has changed within this transition for you as a regulatory?
Thank you for the question. So first I'd like to say that ACER, as an energy regulator for Cooperation for Europe, first of most bothers about the cross-border activities. It's not surprised that regarding the new innovation, for instance, we started now the new department, which is for hydrogen and for decarbonized gas, because the cross-border is normally either goes by the pipelines or either goes by the grid. Yeah? So it's independent from the sources. This is our primary responsibility. The second statement I'd like to do regarding your question, that as I said, ACER is about implementing regulation, but we have a bottom line. We cannot and should not reduce the choice of the three stakeholders. We cannot reduce the choice of the countries. For instance, they decide which kind of taxation they use. It's their free choice. It's a country free choice which kind of energy source they wish to build into their energy mix. Yeah, so the choice of the member states must be guaranteed. The choice of the companies must be guaranteed too. It's their decision which kind of risk they take, yeah, to build or invest or not. Yeah? In that sense, the ACER role is less the de-risking, because the de-risking, interestingly, remains more with the financial markets and with the ESMA, yeah, with the taxonomy and the financial markets. They decide what is green, etc. So it's not our business. Our business is in the other end. Then we have to make sure that the unnecessary risks or the bad investments were taken by the companies. It cannot be charged for the customer, but must remain the risk wrongly taken by the stakeholders. Yeah? So the stakeholder risk choice must be guaranteed, but it also means a bigger risk for them. We cannot take this risk for the customers. I think that it's an important one. And finally, the choice of the customers. Yeah? The customers must have their choice to fill and charge their car or whatever. It has to be their choice. What is our role in all this? To make sure that the countries, the companies, and the customers can make an informed choices, and somehow the methods, how this calculated, is comparable with each other, because that's the way to create an informed choices. Where ACER interact, it was, for instance, when with the huge investment due to the Russian crisis, or due to the crisis after the conflict, and the very fast transition from traditional gas markets to the new gas markets came with the huge investment. Of course, it came with the extraordinarily high prices, as is laid down in the Draghi report. This is where ACER had to interact. And ACER made a calculation for the price caps that when the market cannot solve it, then we have to intervene as an European agency. So I think that if we understand well the principles, that the choices must remain with those are responsible, then yes, ACER has more limited role, but more focused role, and therefore we can really work together to solve it. I think that the ACER contributed very much that beyond the prices, because the prices went up, as I said, we had to intervene, but the continuity of supply was not disturbed, even in the worst moment, in the winter, when the transition was on the top, when we had to buy on the spot market, the LNG, etc., etc. So I think that the first criteria, continuity of the supply, was the primus inter pares. And now, yes, it's very important that we provide the customer choice and we assign the risks where they belong to.
Thank you. I see we're already running late. Still, I'd like to place two more questions. Ms. Wawinger, as we've already heard, one important step now in this transition is the power grid. And I think Mr. Maurer said that there was a lack of master plan, an international master plan. You invest a lot into infrastructure. I'd like to ask you, if you decide on your investments, do you rather see your regional clients, or is there some European master plan behind it already?
Well, you say we're running out of time.
Yeah. I'm sorry, there's so many more questions to ask. But
I'll try the short version of that. I actually think that like national, also international plans not only might be more specific because we're going that way, Austria just developed such a plan, but also we need to take up speed on implementation. There we go back to what you just said about investing, about not only investing with like stable framework, but also taking risks, which always is interacting. For us as Salzburg AG, as far as we're concerned, the majority of our investments are focusing on Salzburg, where we actually do very much know where to invest. And just to give you a relation about what numbers we're talking about, and for international perspectives, they are small numbers. For Salzburg, they are not. This year alone, we're investing in the grid infrastructure 110 million, which usually used to be the whole investment budget of Salzburg AG. We're investing 370 this year, which is more or less doubling the investment budget regarding the like 5 or 7 year average. And we're doing that mainly in grid infrastructure and in everything regarding renewables. So there's a lot to do. And then I come back for one sentence to the regulators. We also need to make sure that companies keep safe and sound in terms of economically stand up. We are not going to be able to invest hundreds of millions when there is no comeback. So we need to be sure that frameworks are more or less stable. We need to be able to calculate the risks, which is our job, but it's very, very difficult if the plans are changing like every year or every other year. And then we're able to do it, and that's what we focus mainly on Salzburg.
It is a message for politicians, although, yeah, because we just implement. What
no, I'm.
You forward the message.
I see your point.
Okay, I want to get back once more to Azerbaijan, because we've heard a lot about you being a supplier of gas, and this is one also main topic or main target of the European Union, to get more independent of external suppliers, mainly now Russia, and Azerbaijan is about to step in for the gas delivery. I think we've already heard to a great extent how you supply gas. Still, 2 more brief questions regarding that. You said that the amount of gas still needs to be increased. Can you maybe determine on which or which aspects are responsible for the fact whether you meet the set goals or not, the amount of 20 million until 2027. And on the other hand, you're also working on renewable energy within Azerbaijan. You're criticized for not being fast enough there, even though you're supposed to meet climate goals. But maybe can you also elaborate on what are your plans there and what are your obstacles? What is the reason for maybe a delay in meeting the climate target goals?
Very briefly, since you said that we're running out of time, on first question, gas is a commodity which you have to have contract demand. So demand is there, especially in Southeast Europe, Central Europe, and the Western Balkans, as we heard. So there's no problem on scaling up the deliveries. The system of pipeline, the Southern Gas Corridor, is actually was designed and built as a scalable. So it is possible to expand. Both TANAP pipeline and Trans-Adriatic pipeline. So we're talking about expansion. Yeah, we are on the course of redoubling our gas exports to Europe, and specifically to the regions of Europe where it is needed the most, Southeast Europe and the Western Balkans. On renewable, and it was mentioned already that renewable energy is intermittent. So you have to, and the more renewable energy you will put into grid, you need to have a backup energy supply. It can be natural gas as a cleanest fossil fuel. It could be other source of energy, but you have to have backup. Second issue is you also have to diversify your renewable energy sources. And that's where the regions like Azerbaijan and Caspian Sea come in, because Caspian Sea and Azerbaijan have abundant renewable energy sources. So I said economic potential 27 gigawatt onshore and 157 gigawatt offshore. It's a huge amount of energy. We already investing in joint ventures with our international partners to develop renewable energy sources, and we project that by 2027 we'll also generate some 4 gigawatt of energy. Some 80% or so will be available for export. So this is why in 2022 we signed MOU with our partners in Hungary, Romania, and Georgia to build Caspian Sea, Black Sea submarine power cable, which would allow to deliver renewable energy, electricity to Europe from the Caspian Sea region. And in terms of green transition, you know, Azerbaijan is leader in green transition in the region. We generate currently 17% of electricity from renewable, and we committed to increase it by 30% by 2030. Also, we are working with, you know, we are committed to reduce CO2 emissions by 35% by 2030. Although the share of Azerbaijan in CO2 emissions globally is 0.17. But nevertheless, Azerbaijan is working, especially we already emerging important actor globally as in terms of green transition, especially in the run-up to the UN Climate Change Conference, COP29, which will take place in Azerbaijan in 2 weeks' time frame.
Okay, thank you. I need a sign if I can place one more question or not. Well, I'll just do so. Because when it comes to getting more independent, we've heard we need different gas resources, we need renewables, but can you maybe also explain what kind or how important is nuclear energy within this transition or within getting independent from outer states?
Happy to do so, but let me perhaps first come back to the question of financing grids, because just to give you a number here. So in Germany, we expect that we will have to spend about 600 billion euros until 2045 on grids, on electricity grids alone. So in roughly equal shares for transmission and distribution. So this is a huge challenge for financing these investments. And the other challenge, and that's about cross-border cooperation then, is if we think about investing in cross-border infrastructure, it's often so that there is an overall social welfare benefit for the entirety of the EU, but costs and benefits are not equally distributed. And you might end up in a situation where countries which would have to invest will see losses in social welfare because of that investment. So if you think about exporting countries, if you invest in your interconnectors, typically electricity prices in your country will go up, because after having the interconnector, you will export more. Now that's a huge challenge for the EU, just to, let's say, implement cross-border financing and compensation mechanisms, which will, let's say, end up in a scenario where all countries which contribute to cross-border investments, which are beneficial from an overall point of view, do not end up in a situation where they, let's say, do not benefit from such investments. That's a little bit similar about nuclear, and then coming back to nuclear then. So coming from a country where people typically tend to have very strong convictions about nuclear energy, being either way, I have to admit I do not have that strong convictions. I'm much more agnostic with regard to nuclear energy. So I'm not convinced it was a good idea to shut down the last nuclear reactors during the energy crisis. I would have loved to see them running. But on the other hand, investing in new nuclear plants for the time being seems to be, let's see, at least a major financial risk and a major risk regarding the practicability. So if we look at Flamanville power plant, for example, in France, which, well, they have been building that for 15 years now, and still it's not really totally ready, and actual costs exceeded the estimations by a factor 3 or 4, and similar for Hinkley Point in the UK. For the time being, it seems to be that nuclear energy, let's say, can only contribute to a limited extent to the transition that we face. Nevertheless, I think that changes on nuclear energy within the EU diverge to a very large extent, and so nuclear energy will play a role in some countries, and it's totally okay that it will play a role in that countries. What really, let's say, bothers me a little is that the nuclear supply chain to a large extent is still largely dependent on Russia. So it's not about the reactors themselves, but if we think about nuclear fuel, for example, the supply chain still involves to a very high degree Russian companies and so on. So if we really want to use nuclear energy to diversify, to get independent from outside forces, then we will think about diversifying the nuclear supply chain. So that's a major issue there, I think.
Okay, thank you. You wanted to contribute?
Yeah, may I add something? I think that it's very important to deal with the definitions here, because there is a huge difference between the definition of renewable, decarbonization, or green. Yeah, so I think we have to carefully look at this. But the last sentence I wanted to say, I'm Hungarian by origin, so I see the Rubik cube here. If you imagine that we have to deal with the continuity of the supply, the decarbonization, the investment, the customers, then the best is to buy, to anyone thinking about the energy union, a Rubik cube and make it properly done. And when you make it, then the energy union probably will properly work. Thank you.
Thank you. I take this as a closing remark. We're really late now, and I can't have a last round for everyone. There was a lot of interesting inputs. Thank you for your contributions. We need to stop here because you deserve a break, and there will be next panel at 11:15. Das Thema illegale Migration nach Europa, ein unlösbares Thema, bei meinem Kollegen Werner Seeker dann. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for listening. Schönen Tag noch, gute Unterhaltung am Salzburg Europe Summit. Dankeschön.